Welcome to Defcon 3. I'm KT McFarland. An Arab-American coalition has launched airstrikes against ISIS headquarters in Syria. The United States has, for the last 6 weeks, been bombing ISIS headquarters in Iraq, but now we've joined into attacks in Syria, which is where the ISIS headquarters are. What happens next? Joining me to talk about this is Paul Floyd. He is a military analyst for Stratfor, the Strategic Analysis, Geopolitical Analysis Organization. He's also a Special Forces veteran and has fought in the Iraq and the Afghan wars. So thank you for joining us again, Paul. Let me ask you, how effective are these airstrikes going to be in degrading and destroying ISIS?
In the sense of degrading, they will have an effect, though it will be limited. In the sense of destroying, that airstrikes alone will not accomplish this mission. The airstrikes we've seen so far, what we've seen over the, so far in Iraq and also last night in Syria, starting, have targeted both headquarters, training camps, supply depots, and vehicles. And the largest effect that this will have is basically blunting ISIS's effect in offensive capabilities. So they've been very good at kind of collecting up, driving together, and massing on certain targets, both in Syria and Iraq, and overwhelming forces where they're weak. And so now if they start to collect or do that, these airstrikes will really we'll be able to see them and hit them. And also we're already trying to preempt that by striking those vehicles and those supply nodes and their command and control.
Okay, so we're bombing everything that moves. We're going to blunt their advance, as you said, but as you point out, that's not necessarily destroying them. Degrade, yes, maybe not destroy. So are boots on the ground needed to do the destruction of ISIS?
Yes. Anytime you're dealing with an insurgency, and granted, this group is, acts conventionally and is kind of in a way an army, a standing army, but their roots are in being an insurgency and being unconventional. They have no qualms about burying themselves in civilian populations in urban areas. And so airstrikes, while it affects their ability to operate in the open and where they're collected together, if they get in the middle of civilian populations, which they will do, or go underground, which they will do, airstrikes can't hit that. So you absolutely need some kind of ground component to work in conjunction with airstrikes that can actually root them out from places that they're operating. Okay,
well, the President has said on a number of occasions no U.S. boots on the ground, and there's been a little bit of qualification to say, well, no combat boots on the ground. But clearly the next step then is will a coalition assemble of moderate Sunni military forces to do the groundwork? What's the likelihood of that happening, and would they be successful?
Well, in the sense, what they're working with right now is the Iraqi security forces, Peshmerga. They've talked about setting up Sunni National Guard units in Iraq. And for Syria, they're talking about working with certain moderate rebels. This has serious limitations, first, foremost, in time. You've got to train all these groups to kind of get up to the standards that we're used to, train them how to work with American air power, and frankly, a lot of them are geographically tied down as well. So the idea that like Peshmerga forces are going to want to, march into Syria to take it to an extreme, that's not going to happen. So if you look at, where ISIS is operating in both Iraq and Syria and putting together some kind of ground troops that's willing to kind of attack that large battle space, right now we don't have it. And the odds are very low you're going to be able to build together a ground coalition that's willing to go that deep into this territory overall.
Well, then what about, okay, so if the Syrian, moderate Syrians that we're going to train and stand up and equip and send back to fight in Syria, that's, as you said, that's kind of a long shot. The Iraqis, that's a long shot. The Peshmerga may defend Kurdistan, but it's a long shot of them retaking areas of Iraq. So what's left? Would the moderate Sunni states, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Bahrain, United Arab Emirates, even Qatar, would they join in some kind of ground operation?
I think the biggest constraint here is Arab nations have, they want to deal with Sunni militancy, extremism to a point, but the idea that you're putting Sunni Arab troops on the ground who would be killing Arabs in conjunction with the U.S. and the West starts to become politically untenable for them at home and their populations. So I think to the line of them doing airstrikes and working out in some limited operations is one thing. Committing to some kind of full-scale combat, which, by the way, they have very little experience in doing,
right.
That's just very limited. That's just not there.
So then where are we in 3 to 6 months if there's no real ground forces of any sort of Muslim ground forces to take the fight to defeat and destroy ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Islamic Jihad in the region. Would the United States be faced with an option or a possibility or even a necessity of sending in large ground forces, or is there some other option? Or do we walk away?
I think the U.S., clearly it's been demonstrated there is no desire to put troops back in this region on the ground in a combat role, as you say. So what we're really looking at is a term that we better use is containment. So what we're going to see is ISIS's positions where they've pushed out the farthest on the edges and really threatened U.S. interests in the region, in both Iraq and Syria. Those will slowly be rolled back, and you'll see ISIS slowly kind of be contained into a pocket, basically in that desert area between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. Okay, well, thank you very much, Paul Floyd, military analyst for Stratfor and Iraq and Afghanistan Special Forces Army vet. Thanks for joining us, and we're going to see you again. That's it for DEFCON 3.